A truck, rolling smoothly downhill. Presented to the world as a fully functional hydrogen-powered vehicle, driving under its own power. It wasn't. It had no engine at all. This is how an electric and hydrogen truck startup reached a market valuation higher than Ford Motor Company, built substantially on demonstrations that weren't quite what they appeared to be. Nikola Corporation, named as a nod to inventor Nikola Tesla, launched with an ambitious pitch: zero-emission semi-trucks, powered by hydrogen fuel cells and batteries, aimed squarely at disrupting the massive, heavily polluting trucking industry. Founder Trevor Milton positioned the company as the trucking world's answer to Tesla, a visionary founder, a bold roadmap, and, crucially, almost no actual working product yet. In 2020, Nikola went public through a merger with a shell company, a faster route to the stock market than a traditional IPO, and one that came with considerably less scrutiny of the underlying business. Within months of going public, Nikola's stock valuation briefly exceeded that of Ford, a century-old company that actually manufactured and sold millions of vehicles a year, despite Nikola having no trucks in commercial production and no meaningful revenue. Investors were betting almost entirely on the promise of future technology and on Trevor Milton's confident public presentations. Milton was an energetic promoter, prone to bold claims about the company's technology being farther along than competitors realized. Some of those claims, it would turn out, described things that hadn't actually happened yet, or hadn't happened the way they were shown to the public. The broader environment mattered too. 2020 was, for a period, an unusually favorable moment for ambitious clean energy startups to reach public markets quickly through shell company mergers, with investor appetite for anything promising to disrupt transportation running well ahead of the traditional due diligence that road tests such promises. Nikola launched directly into that appetite, at exactly the moment skepticism was hardest to find. Here's the part that doesn't add up. In 2018, Nikola released a promotional video showing its Nikola One truck driving under its own power. In September 2020, a short seller research firm called Hindenburg Research published a report alleging that the truck in that video wasn't actually driving at all, it had no functional powertrain installed, and had instead been towed to the top of a slight decline and filmed coasting downhill under gravity, angled to look like level, powered driving. Nikola later acknowledged, in a statement, that the truck was not under its own propulsion in the video, while disputing that this amounted to intentional deception. Hindenburg's report alleged this wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a broader pattern of Milton overstating the company's technological progress to investors, partners, and the public, including claims about proprietary battery and hydrogen technology that, according to the report, Nikola had not actually developed in-house to the degree publicly suggested. Someone was supposed to catch this before the stock ever traded publicly. The relatively light scrutiny that comes with a shell company merger, compared to a traditional IPO process, meant fewer outside parties had closely examined Nikola's actual technological claims before public investors were putting real money behind them. Much of Nikola's valuation rested on a partnership announced with General Motors, which had agreed to take an equity stake and help engineer and manufacture Nikola's pickup truck. Following the Hindenburg report and the mounting scrutiny that followed, GM significantly scaled back the terms of that partnership, no longer taking the equity stake originally announced, a clear signal that one of Nikola's most credibility-lending partners had grown considerably more cautious. Nikola's path to the public market, merging with an already listed shell company, known as a SPAC, rather than filing for a traditional initial public offering, became a case study in its own right for regulators and financial journalists. A traditional IPO involves extensive underwriter due diligence and SEC disclosure review specifically designed to catch exaggerated claims before public investors can buy in. The SPAC route Nikola used was, at the time, subject to considerably lighter scrutiny of forward-looking statements and technology claims. Nikola became one of the highest-profile examples cited when U.S. regulators later moved to tighten disclosure rules specifically for SPAC mergers, closing at least part of the gap that had let an unproven company reach a Ford-beating valuation with minimal independent verification of its core claims. Nikola wasn't operating in a vacuum. The years surrounding its rise were marked by a broader Silicon Valley-adjacent culture where flashy demonstrations, ambitious keynote-style reveals, and confident founder charisma were treated as reasonable substitutes for verified technical progress. Investors accustomed to backing software companies, where a working prototype can sometimes scale into a finished product relatively quickly, applied the same optimism to a much harder, much slower industry, heavy manufacturing and industrial engineering, where a truck that looks impressive on a stage is still years and billions of dollars away from a truck that can actually be built at scale. Trevor Milton resigned as executive chairman within weeks of the Hindenburg report, while maintaining the allegations against him were false. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission and the Department of Justice both opened investigations into the company's public statements. In 2021, the SEC and Department of Justice formally charged Milton with securities fraud and wire fraud, alleging he had made false and misleading statements about Nikola's technology to inflate the stock price. In October 2022, a jury convicted Milton on 3 counts of fraud. He was sentenced in 2023 to 4 years in federal prison. Nikola itself, separate from Milton's personal charges, agreed to pay a $125 million penalty to the SEC to settle allegations that the company had defrauded investors through misleading statements about its technology. The company's stock, which had briefly made it worth more than Ford on paper, lost the overwhelming majority of its value in the following years, and Nikola continued to face significant financial difficulty in actually bringing commercial trucks to market at scale. Trevor Milton was later granted clemency, with his sentence commuted, though the underlying conviction and the SEC findings against the company remained part of the public record. Hindenburg Research, the short-selling firm whose original report triggered the entire unraveling, went on to publish similar investigative reports targeting other high-profile companies in the years that followed, building a reputation as one of the more consequential players in exposing corporate fraud through detailed, publicly published research rather than relying solely on regulators to investigate first. Nikola itself continued operating, eventually delivering a limited number of commercial trucks years behind its original timeline, though the company never came close to fulfilling the production ambitions that had originally driven its valuation past Ford's. The broader SPAC boom that Nikola rode to the public markets largely cooled in the years that followed, partly as a direct result of cases like this one. Several other companies that had gone public through similar shell company mergers around the same period faced their own accounting restatements, delisting proceedings, or fraud investigations, prompting many investors and regulators to treat the entire SPAC mechanism with considerably more caution than they had during its peak popularity. Nikola's core problem wasn't a hidden accounting scheme or a secret shell company moving money around. It was simpler and, in some ways, more old-fashioned. A founder who let the public believe demonstrations were more real than they were, at a moment when the company's entire stock valuation depended almost entirely on the public believing exactly that. There's a specific lesson here about the gap between a prototype and a product. In hardware and manufacturing, the distance between, "we built one that works under controlled conditions," and, "we can build thousands of these reliably, safely, and profitably," is enormous, often the hardest and most expensive part of the entire business. Nikola's stock price, for a period, priced in the second achievement while the company had barely demonstrated the first, and in at least one prominent case, hadn't even fully demonstrated that. The numbers always tell the story eventually. Sometimes, so does a truck that never should have made it to the top of that hill in the first place. A truck coasting downhill briefly made a company worth more than Ford.